All right, I'm in a Jaguar XKE and I'm going to show you how to test your temperature, your water temperature gauge, to make sure that it's not the gauge that's bad. Right now, no matter how hot it is, no matter how far I drive, my gauge will not move at all. So there's a couple things. It can be the voltage stabilizer, which I'll show you in a minute. It can be in the temperature gauge itself. It can be the temperature sensor on the engine. It can be the wiring. It can be all sorts of things. But anyhow, I'm going to do a quick test and we'll see whether or not the gauge works. All right. And if the gauge works when I do this, that means that the fuse is working. That means that there's continuity between the temperature gauge and the sensor on the engine. That means that the ground for the gauge is good. So anyhow, let me show you how to first of all test this. I've got this wire here hooked up to the voltage sensor on the engine, and I'll show you where that is in a second. But right now, I turn the ignition on, not the engine, just the ignition. I take this wire right here. I'm going to touch it to the ground, which I'm going to use my handbrake cable. Now watch the gauge. Okay, so that means that all of those things that I just mentioned are good. Let me turn off the ignition. I'm going to pull down the panel and show you the voltage stabilizer. Okay, that's a nasty place to have to go, but that's where it is. All right, so this is your voltage stabilizer right here. This controls your gas gauge and your temperature gauge. If this is bad, then neither of your gauges are going to work. This is a cheap thing. You can get these on eBay. You can get them anywhere, $13 to $30. So on one side, you're going to have your wires over here, which go to the oil and the gas gauge, or excuse me, the temperature in the gas gauge. So what you want to do if you're not getting any reading on the gauge is make sure that your wires are good. And for that, you'd pull off your wires. All right, pull off your wires, and on the bottom, you're going to see, I think it says B and I. So make sure that you hook the wires back up. Take a picture before you pull it off. So you take the wire, and then one of these wires here, I think it's this one. I'm not sure. I've already had it off. I think it's this one. This will go right over to your temperature gauge. And you just do a continuity check on that and make sure that it's working okay. If it's working okay, then you move on to something else. But I've already done that. The other thing is that there's this voltage stabilizer has a bolt that bolts onto the back of your access panel, which is copper, and that serves as a ground. So you might want to take that off, sand it down, make sure that you're getting good ground contact. So anyhow, let me move over. Let me make sure the engine's shut off. I'm going to move over and show you where the voltage temperature thing is on the engine block itself, which is where I have this wire connected that I just grounded. Now, I'm in a really tough spot in here. It's hard to get out of here. Okay, but I'm out. So let me walk around. Let me walk around to the car. All right. So you can see right here in the engine, that's where your temperature sensor is. It goes into the engine. And what I've done is I've disconnected the wire, hooked it up with just a little alligator clip, and let me take that off now. And put it back on here, and then there's a little brass nut that goes on there and tightens it up. So anyhow, I'm thinking maybe my problem is right in the sensor itself. And so I'll have to pull that out and take a look at it. It could be corroded, but I know that this wire here going up to the temperature gauge is okay. I know that everything else is okay. So I'm thinking that's where my problem is. So anyhow, I hope this helps you out.